Hello, my name is Michelle Mack. I am completing my speech today on the fear of not knowing. The fear of not knowing your HIV status. The greatest fear that a person can have is the fear of not knowing. How many people watching this speech actually know their HIV status currently? For years, I'd never get myself tested because I was afraid of it. The only time that I really would get an HIV test is when I found out I was pregnant and it was part of the routine initial pregnancy exam. So that was the only time that I would ever actually know what my status was. It only takes one time for a person to become infected with the HIV virus. So I want every single one of you who are watching this speech to take time out of your day to schedule a doctor's appointment, visit the local health department, and they also sell individual HIV testing kits in your neighborhood pharmacies. And that way you can get yourself tested and actually know your status. I will cover 3 points. I will tell you why I was always afraid to know my status, how I overcame my fears, and I'll also discuss how HIV is rapidly spreading in the African American community. I'll also tell you ways that you can protect yourself from possibly becoming infected with HIV and AIDS. I would like to begin by talking about why I was always afraid to get HIV tested. I never wanted to know because I would never know what it would feel like if this were to happen to me. I used to have a mentality that if I was in a relationship with someone and if they weren't sick, like coughing, like flu, or if they weren't really sick, then in my head, I felt like, okay, they're not sick, so I'm not sick, or I won't be sick. So I felt that as long as I didn't know, that I will be fine. And it's like when you find out that you're sick, that you really start to decline, or you have that built up, that type of thought built up in your head that, oh, I'm sick, and things just start to go downhill. As I stated earlier, the only time I would get tested is during a routine pregnancy exam. And the thing that I hated the most about getting my HIV testing done was the waiting period. And it took normally around 2 weeks to actually get your results back. Now it really only takes just a couple of minutes to find out your status. So I finally built up the courage to start going and getting myself tested regularly, yearly at my annual doctor's visits. And I'm just now more aware of what could happen to me and how things could affect me, and that if this is caught in time, that there are treatments for me. So it's better to know than to not know. So now that you've heard about my personal experience about getting my HIV testing done, I want to talk about how HIV is spreading rapidly. HIV is greatly increasing in the African American community. According to the Pinellas County Health Department, there are more African Americans living with HIV and AIDS, and there are more that have already died from AIDS than any other racial group. In Florida in 2005, 1 in 58 non-Hispanic Black males and 1 in 83 non-Hispanic Black females were living with diagnosed cases of HIV and AIDS. In comparison, 1 in 310 non-Hispanic white males and 1 in 1,625 non-Hispanic white females, 1 in 48 Hispanic males, and 1 in 553 Hispanic females. There are gaps between blacks and whites and gaps between Hispanics and blacks and whites. gaps in, which is the biggest gap so far. A confirmed positive HIV test must be reported to the Florida Department of Health by every laboratory as well as by physicians who diagnose or treats a case. And that's been since 1997. Approximately 90% of all diagnosed HIV cases and AIDS cases are reported, which is the highest completeness rate of all diseases. Through 2005, nearly 137,000 HIV and AIDS cases have been reported in Florida. Out of that, 55,000 people have already died. Through 2005, there were 81,585 people living with HIV and AIDS in Florida. African Americans account for 51% of all persons living with HIV and AIDS, but only 14% of the population. So HIV and AIDS is the leading cause of death among Black males and Black females aged 25 to 44 years old. I will now tell you ways that you can protect yourselves from others and possibly becoming infected with HIV virus. The first step that you need to do is actually go and get HIV test done. Deciding to be tested and waiting for the results can be hard. Take a close friend or a relative with you, and they can help you to get through it. And also have them consider getting an HIV test done as well so that they can know their status. 20 minutes of your time could save your life or someone else's life. There are now, there's new OraQuick, rapid advanced HIV antibody tests that you can get your results in about 20 minutes. They have facilities that you can go to, your doctor's office, going there, they send it off to a lab, and it'll take probably about a week or so for your results. But they have a lot of different organizations now that you can go and actually get your status like within that same waiting period, about 15 to 20 minutes. The best way to avoid getting HIV is to avoid activities that would allow you to actually become infected with the virus. That is by having sexual exposure and with an infected partner and sharing needles. So the only way to avoid actually becoming infected is by using protection, knowing your status by getting HIV tested, you and your partner, and also abstinence. So if you're not certain if your partner is infected or not, you should use a latex condom correctly every time you have sex. And as I stated, do not share syringes or needles. So after hearing all of this information that I've provided, I just have one request. I want everybody to take some time out and just go and get your test done, whether it's doing your routine medical exam, whether you just go into maybe your neighborhood has an agency where you can go and get your testing done. If you go into a pharmacy and buy a testing kit, but go and get your test done so that way you know your status. And if you have a partner, you can do it together, so therefore you both know each other's status. And also, practice safe sex, stay in a monogamous relationship, and do not share needles or syringes. So I just want to finish by leaving you all with these thoughts. I've covered 3 truthful points. I've told you why I was afraid to know my status and how I overcame my fears. I discussed how HIV is spreading rapidly among the African American communities, and I've told you ways that you can protect yourself from possibly becoming infected with HIV and AIDS. It's important to know your HIV and AIDS status. I want each and every one of you to visit your doctors, get your test done, know your status. Millions of people have STDs right now. About half of the people who get HIV are under the age of 25. There's no cure, and there's no vaccine that'll help prevent it. So please be safe and get yourself tested, because silence is death. Thank you.